The marketplace stank of sweat, fear, and something metallic that Deho couldn't quite place. He stood on the raised platform with 12 other humans, all of them chained at the wrists and ankles. The chains weren't necessary, not really. Where would they run? They were light years from Earth, surrounded by creatures that could tear them apart without thinking twice. Around the platform, aliens of every shape and size moved through the crowd. Most were Valorians, the reptilian conquerors who ruled this part of the galaxy. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in scales that shimmered blue and green under the artificial lights. Crystalline armor grew from their shoulders and forearms like natural weapons. They didn't need technology to be dangerous. They were born that way. The auctioneer was a Valorian named Krell. His voice boomed across the marketplace as he gestured toward the humans with one clawed hand. Fresh stock from the outer territories. Humans, weak, yes, but trainable. Good for cleaning, cooking, simple labor. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A group of Valorian warriors stood near the front, their armor marked with battle honors. They pointed at the humans and made jokes in their own language. Deho understood every word. He'd spent 3 months learning Valorian during his captivity, staying quiet while his captors assumed he was too stupid to comprehend them. Look at that one, a warrior said, pointing at an older human man who trembled on the platform. It's shaking like a hatchling. Pathetic. I heard humans can't even survive a sun cycle without water, another warrior added. What kind of species is that weak? More laughter. Deho kept his face blank, his eyes forward. He'd learned early on that showing emotion only made things worse. The Valorians enjoyed fear. They fed on it. So he gave them nothing. Krell pulled the first human forward, a woman in her 40s. This female, healthy, can work for 10 cycles before rest. Do I hear 50 credits? The bidding started slow. Humans weren't valuable compared to other species. The Krogar slaves, massive beings from the war world of Krogar Prime, sold for thousands of credits. The Silith assassins with their venomous fangs and speed went for even more. But humans? They were cheap labor, nothing more. One by one, the humans were sold. The woman went to a merchant who needed servants for his household. 2 young men were bought by a mining operation. A teenage girl was purchased by a wealthy Valorian who wanted someone to tend her garden. Each sale was accompanied by jokes and casual cruelty. Then Krell grabbed Deho by the arm and dragged him forward. This male, young, strong for a human. Look at this physique. Deho stood at the edge of the platform. He was lean, not bulky like the warriors wanted, but there was muscle on his frame. Scars marked his arms and chest. Thin white lines that told stories he'd never share. His dark hair was short, practical. His eyes were brown and calm, too calm for someone in chains. 30 credits. Someone shouted from the back. 30 credits for this specimen? Come now, surely he's worth more than that. Krell tried to drum up interest, but the crowd wasn't impressed. That's when Commander Thek stepped forward. He was larger than most Valorians, his armor covered in battle scars. His eyes were cold and yellow, like a predator deciding if something was worth eating. He looked Deho up and down with obvious disgust. How much for all of them? Thex asked, gesturing at the remaining humans. The lot? 200 credits, Commander. Thex laughed. 200? I'll give you 150. Krell hesitated, then nodded. Sold to Commander Thex. The warriors behind Thex cheered. They were already making plans for their new servants, discussing who would carry their weapons, who would clean their quarters, who would serve as entertainment when they got bored. Thex walked up to the platform and stared at Deho. You. What's your designation? Deho, he replied quietly. It speaks. Thex seemed amused. Then, without warning, he shoved Deho hard. Deho stumbled backward, his chains rattling, and fell onto the platform. The crowd erupted in laughter. Thex stood over him, sneering. Learn your place, human. You exist to serve your betters. Remember that. Deho slowly got to his feet. He said nothing, did nothing, but for just a moment his eyes met Thex's, and there was something in that gaze that made the commander pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was calculation, the look of someone measuring an opponent. The moment passed. Thex turned away, already dismissing the human as beneath his notice. High above the marketplace, in a private viewing box reserved for royalty, Princess Arya watched the scene unfold. She was younger than most of the military commanders, barely into her 3rd decade, but her mind was sharper than any blade. While her father, the Emperor, spent his time on politics and war, Arya studied. She read everything the Empire's archives contained about the species they conquered. She wanted to understand them, not just rule them. And right now she was very interested in the human who'd just been shoved to the ground. Most humans she'd seen in the Empire were broken. They shuffled with their heads down, spoke in whispers, flinched at sudden movements. This one was different. He fell, yes, but it wasn't the fall of someone defeated. It was controlled, measured. And those eyes. Arya pulled up her datapad and accessed the human's identification file. Deho, captured 3 months ago during a raid on a civilian transport near the Epsilon sector. No military markings, no special skills listed. Origin, Earth, Sol system. Something about that file bothered her. It was too clean, too simple. When the Empire captured slaves, they documented everything. Family connections, skills, health records, psychological profiles. But Deho's file was bare minimum, almost like someone had scrubbed it. She tapped another command on her datapad, sending a message to her personal intelligence network. She had agents throughout the Empire, people loyal to her rather than her father. They were her eyes and ears in places the official military couldn't or wouldn't look. The message was brief. Track the human purchased by Commander Thex, designation, Deho. I want to know everything. Where he came from, what ship he was really on. Everything the official records don't say. Below in the marketplace, guards were herding the purchased humans toward a transport vehicle. Deho walked with the others, his chains clinking softly. He didn't look up at the viewing boxes. He didn't need to. He could feel eyes on him, and not just the casual cruelty of the warriors. Someone else was watching, someone with actual intelligence behind their gaze. Good, he thought. Let them look. Let them wonder. Because Deho had a secret that none of these aliens understood. He wasn't here by accident. His capture wasn't bad luck. He'd volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what it would cost. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the Valorian Empire, Earth was watching. Earth was waiting, and Earth never abandoned its people. The transport vehicle lifted off, carrying its cargo of human slaves toward whatever fresh hell Commander Thex had planned for them. Deho sat in the back, surrounded by frightened people who didn't understand why this was happening to them. He understood perfectly. And soon everyone else would too. The barracks smelled like blood and sweat and something else Deho couldn't identify. It was a sharp, acrid smell that made his nose wrinkle. The building was massive, built to house warriors from a dozen different species, all of them captured and forced to fight in the arena for the entertainment of Valorian nobles. Guards threw Deho and the other humans through the main entrance. They tumbled onto the hard floor, their chains finally removed but their freedom still a distant dream. Around them, alien warriors stopped what they were doing to stare at the newcomers. A Krogar warrior, easily 10 feet tall and covered in thick gray skin like armor plating, laughed so hard the ground seemed to shake. Humans? They brought us humans to serve us? What's next, bringing in infants? More laughter echoed through the barracks. A Silith fighter, serpentine and quick, slithered closer to examine them. Her forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. They smell like fear. At least they know their place. Commander Thex stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking most of the light. Listen well, humans. You belong to the warriors of this den now. You clean their weapons. You prepare their food. You maintain their equipment. You do whatever they tell you to do, whenever they tell you to do it. Fail and you'll wish you'd died in the marketplace. He pointed at Deho. You, the quiet one. You'll be assigned to the Krogar named Vexer. Try not to disappoint him. He has a short temper. Vexer stepped forward, his massive arms crossed over his chest. Each arm was thicker than Deho's entire torso. His face was brutish, with small eyes that held a mean intelligence. A human servant. How the mighty have fallen. Fine. You'll start by cleaning my quarters. They haven't been touched in 2 moon cycles. Deho nodded once. He didn't speak, didn't argue. Around him, the other humans were being divided up among the warriors, each one assigned to a different master. An older human woman was given to a group of Dranth warriors who immediately sent her to the kitchens. 2 younger humans were assigned to weapons maintenance. The barracks slowly returned to normal. Warriors went back to their training, their gambling, their endless preparation for the next fight. Humans scattered to their assigned duties, trying to become invisible, trying not to attract attention. Deho followed Vexer through the corridors. The Krogar's quarters were in the back of the barracks, a large room that stank of unwashed clothes and rotting food. Weapons lay scattered across every surface. The bed, if you could call it that, was just a pile of furs on the floor. "Clean this," Vexer growled. "I want it spotless by the time I return from training. There's cleaning solution in that corner. Don't break anything or I'll break you." He left, his heavy footsteps fading down the corridor. Deho stood alone in the filthy room. He waited, counting to 100 in his head, making sure Vexer was truly gone. Then he got to work. But he wasn't just cleaning. He was studying. Every weapon told him something about Krogar fighting style. They preferred heavy blades, brutal and straightforward. No finesse, just raw power. The way the armor was stacked showed him their vulnerable points. The joints, the neck, the space behind the knee where the thick skin was thinnest. He worked methodically, making the room clean enough to satisfy Vexer, but not so clean it would seem suspicious. While he cleaned, his mind cataloged everything. Exit routes, potential weapons, weak points in the barracks structure. 3 hours later, Vexer returned with 2 other Krogar warriors. They barely glanced at the cleaned room. To them, Deho had done exactly what a slave was supposed to do. Nothing worth acknowledging. "You," Vexer said, throwing a bundle at Deho's feet, "take these wraps to the cleaning station, and bring me food from the kitchen. Meat still bloody?" Deho picked up the bundle and left. As he walked through the barracks, he kept his head down but his eyes active. He mapped every corridor, every room, every guard post. He noted the schedules when guards changed shifts, when warriors trained, when the barracks were most and least populated. In the kitchen, he found the older woman who'd been assigned there. Her name was Hana, and she looked exhausted. Dried tears marked her face. "How are you so calm?" she whispered as she prepared Vexer's food. "Don't you understand what's happening to us?" "I understand perfectly," Deho replied quietly. "That's why I'm calm." She didn't understand and he couldn't explain. Not yet. Over the next 2 weeks, Deho established a routine. He served Vexer without complaint. He cleaned weapons for other warriors when they demanded it. He ran errands, carried equipment, did whatever menial task was thrown at him. To everyone in the barracks, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a submissive human slave who knew his place. But at night, in the small storage room where the humans were allowed to sleep, Deho exercised. Not the loud, aggressive training of the warriors. His movements were precise and controlled. Breathing exercises, flexibility work, muscle memory drills for combat techniques these aliens had never seen. One night he found he wasn't alone. A young female fighter sat in the shadows watching him. She wasn't Valorian. Her skin was a pale blue and she had forearms that moved with liquid grace. Her species had been conquered recently, added to the Empire's collection of arena fighters. "You move like a warrior," she said quietly in broken Valorian. "But they think you're weak." Deho stopped, studying her. "What's your name?" "Bora. My world fell 3 seasons ago. Now I fight for their entertainment." Her voice was bitter. "You're different from the other humans. They cry at night. You don't." "Crying doesn't change anything," Deho said simply. Bora nodded slowly. Over the following days, they spoke in quiet moments when the warriors weren't watching. She told him about the arena, about how fighters were matched against each other, about the nobles who bet on the outcomes. She warned him which warriors were cruelest, which ones to avoid. In return, Deho shared nothing about himself. But he listened, absorbing every piece of information like a sponge. Meanwhile, high above in the Imperial Palace, Princess Arya received reports from her agents. The news was disturbing. The human Deho was not on a civilian transport, her chief agent reported. "Our deep scan of the wreckage shows military-grade shielding and encrypted communication systems. Someone scrubbed the official records." Arya leaned forward in her chair. "Military? Are you certain?" "As certain as we can be without examining the human directly, Your Highness." "But there's more." We cross-referenced the timing of his capture with Earth's known fleet movements. A human vessel was reported missing in that sector. A scout ship. Military designation. "A scout ship," Arya repeated slowly. "And somehow this Deho ends up in our slave markets, his records cleaned, pretending to be a civilian." She pulled up restricted files, ones her father had classified decades ago. Files about Earth, about the failed invasion, about why the Valorian Empire had quietly decided to never attack humanity's homeworld directly. The files painted a terrifying picture. Human soldiers who fought with a ferocity that made Krogar berserkers look tame. Tactics that turned their physical weakness into devastating advantage. A species that refused to surrender, that would rather die fighting than submit. And now they had one of those soldiers, disguised as a slave right in the heart of their military training complex. Arya made a decision. Put surveillance on him. I want to know everything he does, everyone he talks to. But do it quietly. If he really is what I think he is, we don't want to spook him. Back in the barracks, Daeho lay on his thin mat, staring at the ceiling. Around him, other humans slept fitfully. Bo-Ra was somewhere in the fighters' quarters, probably dreaming of her lost home. He touched his chest, feeling the small implant beneath his skin. It was biological technology, invisible to Valorian scanners. Right now it was dormant, but when the time came, it would transmit a signal that would travel faster than light itself. 3 months of observation. 3 months of gathering intelligence. Soon, very soon, he would have enough information, and then Earth would come for its people, all of them. The morning started like any other. Daeho woke before dawn, performed his quiet exercises, and began his duties. He collected Vexor's training weapons from the armory, carried them to the practice arena, and set them out in the precise order the Krogar preferred. Then he stepped back into the shadows to wait. The practice arena was open air, surrounded by high walls. Warriors from different species trained here every day, preparing for the scheduled fights that entertained Valorian nobles. Today the arena was busy. Krogar warriors practiced their heavy strikes against reinforced posts. Silith fighters moved through speed drills, their bodies blurring with motion. Dranth shock troops worked on their defensive formations. Vexor arrived with 3 other Krogar, all of them eager to train. They barely acknowledged Daeho's presence as they picked up their weapons. The training began with simple drills but soon evolved into sparring matches. Vexor was good, better than Daeho had initially estimated. His movements were efficient for someone so large, and he had a tactical mind that made him dangerous. The sparring match was against a younger Krogar named Rock. They circled each other with massive blades, each strike powerful enough to shatter stone. The other warriors gathered to watch, shouting encouragement and insults in equal measure. Then it happened. Vexor swung hard at Rock's guard. The blade connected with a sharp crack, and suddenly Vexor's weapon snapped in half. The broken blade spun through the air and embedded itself in the ground 3 feet away. The arena went silent. Vexor stared at his broken weapon in disbelief. Then his face darkened with rage. What is this? This blade was inspected yesterday. It was perfect. The training master, a scarred Valorian named Drax, walked over to examine the broken weapon. He pulled it from the ground and studied the breakpoint. Stress fracture. The metal was compromised. Impossible, Vexor roared. I checked it myself. He spun around, his small eyes searching the crowd. Then they landed on Daeho, standing quietly in the shadows. The human. He maintained my weapons yesterday. Every eye in the arena turned toward Daeho. He stood perfectly still, his expression neutral. He'd expected something like this eventually. Warriors like Vexor always needed someone to blame when things went wrong. Vexor stomped toward him, each step making the ground tremble. You damaged my blade. You tried to get me killed. I cleaned and oiled your weapons as instructed. Daeho replied calmly. I didn't damage anything. Liar. Vexor's hand shot out and grabbed Daeho by the throat, lifting him off the ground. You sabotaged my equipment. That's attempted murder of a warrior. The penalty is death. Daeho didn't struggle. He kept his breathing controlled despite the massive hand crushing his windpipe. Around them, warriors gathered closer, sensing entertainment. Drax stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. Put the human down, Vexor. Accusations of sabotage require proof. The proof is in my broken blade, Vexor snarled, but he dropped Daeho. Daeho fell to his knees, gasping for air. The human is either incompetent or malicious. Either way, he must answer for it. Then issue a formal challenge, Drax said. Trial by combat. If the human is guilty, he'll fall. If he's innocent, the gods will protect him. The arena erupted in laughter. A trial by combat? Between a Krogar warrior and a human? The outcome was so obvious it was almost insulting to call it a trial. But Valorian law was clear. Any accused could demand trial by combat, and any accuser could issue such a challenge. Vexor's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Yes, trial by combat. Tomorrow at sun high in front of all the barracks. I'll show everyone what happens to slaves who forget their place, the crowd cheered. Warriors began making bets immediately. How long would the human last? Would he even survive the first blow? Some bet that Deho would die within seconds. The kindest estimates gave him perhaps a minute. Bora pushed through the crowd and grabbed Deho's arm as he stood. Are you insane? You can't fight Vexer, he'll tear you apart. Probably, Deho admitted, his voice still rough from being choked. Then run. I can help you escape the barracks. There are service tunnels that— No. Deho's voice was firm. I'm tired of running. Bora stared at him like he'd lost his mind. She didn't understand. How could she? She didn't know that Deho had been running his entire time here. Not physically, but in purpose. Running from confrontation, hiding his true nature, pretending to be weak. He was tired of the act. The news of the challenge spread through the barracks within hours. By evening, it had reached the noble houses. Trials by combat were rare entertainment, especially ones this unbalanced. Word reached the imperial palace by nightfall. Princess Arya was in her study when her personal assistant brought the news. Your Highness, there's to be a trial by combat tomorrow. At the warrior barracks. That's hardly unusual, Arya replied without looking up from her datapad. Warriors challenge each other constantly. This one is different. It's between a Krogar fighter and a human slave, the human you asked us to watch. Deho. Arya's head snapped up. What? She listened as her assistant explained the situation. A broken weapon, an accusation of sabotage, a challenge issued and accepted. It should have been a minor incident barely worth noting, but Arya's instincts screamed that this was important. She pulled up the surveillance reports her agents had compiled. Deho's behavior over the past weeks had been perfectly submissive. Too perfect, perhaps. He did his duties without complaint, never caused trouble, never drew attention. But her agents had noted something odd. Late at night, when he thought no one was watching, the human performed exercises. Not the desperate, panicked training of someone trying to survive, but controlled, precise movements that spoke of deep training. I want to attend, Arya said suddenly. Her assistant blinked in surprise. Your Highness? It's just a slave execution. Surely it's beneath your attention. Nevertheless, I'll be there. Arrange my transport and security detail. I want to see this. That night in the barracks, Deho didn't train. Instead, he sat in the storage room with his eyes closed, breathing slowly. Other humans gathered around him, whispering their fears and prayers. Hana brought him food, though he barely touched it. Why did you accept? Hana asked, tears in her eyes. You're going to die tomorrow. For what, to prove a point? Deho opened his eyes and looked at her. Not to prove a point. To send a message. What message? That humans can be just as foolish as any other species? He smiled slightly. Something like that. Bora visited him one last time before the night ended. She brought him water and sat beside him in silence for a long moment. In my culture, she finally said, we believe that warriors who die with honor join the eternal fight in the sky. They become stars. That's beautiful, Deho replied. I hope you become a bright star, Deho, the brightest one. She stood to leave, then paused. You're not afraid, are you? No, he said honestly. I stopped being afraid a long time ago. After she left, Deho lay down on his thin mat. Around him, other humans whispered prayers in languages from a dozen Earth nations. They thought he was going to his death. They thought tomorrow would be his end. They were wrong. Deho touched the implant beneath his chest one more time. Not yet, he thought. Not quite yet. He needed one more piece of information, one more confirmation. And tomorrow's fight would give it to him. He closed his eyes and slept dreamlessly. While he slept, Vexer drank and celebrated with other warriors, already planning how he would end the human's life. While he slept, Princess Arya prepared her transport to the barracks, her mind full of questions and suspicions. While he slept, somewhere far beyond Valorian space, human ships moved silently through the void, getting closer with each passing hour. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Tomorrow's fight wouldn't be an execution. It would be a revelation, and once the truth was revealed, nothing would ever be the same. Dawn came too quickly for some and not quickly enough for others. The arena was being prepared. Crowds were gathering. Bets were being placed, and in the storage room, Deho opened his eyes and stood. He stretched once, his muscles loose and ready. Today, he thought. Today they learn. Today everyone learns what humanity really is. The arena was packed. Warriors from every corner of the barracks had gathered, along with slaves, servants, and guards. Word had spread beyond the military complex, and now nobles arrived in their floating platforms, eager to witness what they thought would be an amusing spectacle. The betting pools had grown enormous. No one was betting on the human to win. The only bets were about how quickly he would die. Princess Arya arrived in her royal transport, accompanied by a full security detail. Her father, Emperor Taeyang, had questioned her decision to attend what he called a minor slave matter, but she'd insisted. Now she sat in the royal viewing box, her eyes scanning the arena with intense focus. Below, on the sandy floor of the arena, Vexer entered to thunderous cheers. He raised his arms, showing off his massive physique. His skin was thick as armor plating, his muscles rippled with power, and his eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone who had killed many opponents before. He carried a massive blade in each hand, each weapon as long as a human was tall. Then Daeho entered from the opposite gate. The crowd's cheers turned to laughter and mocking shouts. He looked tiny compared to Vexer, barely coming up to the Krogar's chest. A guard had given him a single short blade, more like a large knife than a proper weapon. He wore simple cloth pants and nothing else, his scarred torso exposed to the crowd. But Princess Arya noticed what others didn't. Daeho's breathing was calm and controlled. His posture was relaxed but ready. His eyes were clear and focused. This wasn't the stance of a terrified slave. This was the stance of a trained fighter. Training Master Drax stood at the center of the arena, his voice magically amplified to reach every ear. "This is a trial by combat." The Krogar warrior Vexer accuses the human slave Daeho of sabotage and attempted murder. The accused has the right to defend himself by blade. The fight continues until death or surrender. "Let the trial begin." Drax stepped back. The arena fell silent. Even the mockery stopped as everyone waited for the inevitable slaughter. Vexer charged. He moved fast for someone so large, his blades swinging in powerful arcs, meant to cut Daeho in half. The crowd screamed in excitement. Daeho wasn't there. He'd moved before Vexer's charge was fully committed, slipping to the side with minimal movement. The massive blade passed through empty air where he'd been standing. Vexer's momentum carried him forward, and he had to catch himself to avoid stumbling. The crowd went quiet, confused. That was just luck, they told themselves. The human got lucky. Vexer spun and attacked again, this time with both blades in a cross pattern that should have been impossible to dodge in the confined space. Daeho dropped low, the blades passing over his head, then rolled away before Vexer could adjust. Now the crowd was murmuring. That wasn't luck. That was skill. Stand still and die like you're supposed to. Vexer roared, frustrated. He launched into a series of attacks, each one powerful enough to shatter stone. His blades moved in deadly patterns, the kind of assault that had killed dozens of opponents before. But Daeho flowed around every strike like water. He didn't block. His small blade couldn't possibly block those massive weapons. Instead, he moved with absolute economy of motion. Every dodge was precisely calculated, using the minimum energy necessary. He was reading Vexer's attacks before they fully developed, seeing the telegraphs in the Krogar's body language. The laughter had died completely. Warriors who'd been joking minutes ago now watched in stunned silence. This wasn't how the fight was supposed to go. The human should be dead already. 3 minutes passed. Vexer was breathing hard now, his attacks becoming slightly slower, slightly less precise. Fighting was exhausting, especially when you fought with raw power. Every missed strike wasted energy. Daeho, by contrast, was barely breathing hard. He'd been conserving his energy while Vexer burned through his reserves like a wildfire. In the royal box, Princess Arya leaned forward in her seat. She was watching a master at work. Every movement Daeho made was purposeful. He wasn't just dodging randomly. He was controlling the fight, forcing Vexer to attack from poor angles, making him waste energy on strikes that had no chance of landing. What in the gods' names? Her head of security muttered beside her. Then Daeho struck. It was a small cut, barely more than a scratch on Vexer's left arm. The Krogar didn't even seem to notice at first, but seconds later his left arm began to tremble. The massive blade in that hand suddenly felt too heavy to hold properly. Daeho had struck a nerve cluster, precise, surgical, temporary but devastating in a fight. The crowd realized what they were seeing. This wasn't an execution. This was a demonstration. The human was showing them exactly how outmatched Vexer really was. Vexer noticed his arm wasn't responding properly and switched to one-handed fighting, bringing his right blade around in a desperate horizontal slash. Deho ducked under it and struck again, this time a shallow cut on Vexer's right leg just behind the knee. Vexer's leg buckled. He caught himself, but now he was limping. Another nerve cluster disabled. What are you? Vexer gasped, his voice containing something alien to him, fear. Deho didn't answer. He kept moving, kept striking. Small cuts, each one perfectly placed. He was dismantling Vexer piece by piece, not through power but through precision. He struck pressure points, nerve clusters, and joint vulnerabilities that most fighters didn't even know existed. 5 minutes into the fight, Vexer dropped to one knee. His weapons fell from his numb hands. His body was betraying him, shutting down from the accumulated damage to his nervous system. He hadn't lost much blood. Each cut was shallow, but his own biology had been turned against him. The arena was completely silent now. Thousands of spectators watched in disbelief as the weak human stood over the mighty Krogar warrior. Deho moved behind Vexer, his blade coming to rest against the Krogar's throat. He could kill him now. One quick motion and the trial would be over. Instead, Deho spoke. His voice was quiet, but in the absolute silence of the arena everyone heard. Yield. Vexer's pride warred with his survival instinct, but he'd felt the blade at his throat. Knew how easily this human could have killed him at any point in the fight. I yield, he finally gasped. Deho stepped back and lowered his blade. The trial was over. He'd won. The crowd erupted, but not in celebration, in shocked confusion and angry disbelief. How was this possible? Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be helpless. But this human had just defeated one of their finest warriors without breaking a sweat. In the royal box, several high-ranking military officers were arguing in urgent whispers. Princess Arya heard fragments of their conversation. Impossible. The reports were true, if they find out. Containment protocol. Containment protocol. That phrase made Arya's blood run cold. She knew what it meant. There were things the military had kept from her father, from the public, from the galaxy. She stood abruptly and spoke with the voice of royal command. Clear a path. I am going down there. Her guards tried to protest, but she silenced them with a look. She descended from the box and walked directly onto the arena floor. The crowd parted before her, warriors and slaves alike bowing to imperial authority. Deho stood at the center of the arena, still holding his blade, still calm. His eyes met hers as she approached. There was no fear in those eyes, no submission. Just patient waiting. Princess Arya stopped 10 feet from him. She was aware that thousands of eyes watched this moment, that every word would be remembered and repeated, so she chose her words carefully. You fight like no human I've ever seen, she said clearly. Where did you learn these techniques? The military officers in the crowd tensed. Some started moving toward the arena floor, but Arya's personal guards blocked them. This was her moment, her question. Deho looked at her for a long moment. Then he glanced at the watching crowd, at the military officers who looked ready to kill him rather than let him speak. He made a decision. I learned them on Earth, he said simply. In military training, all of us did. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Military training? But humans were weak. Everyone knew that. The Valorian Empire's own reports confirmed it. Princess Arya felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. The scrubbed records, the classified files, the containment protocols. She spoke loudly, clearly, so everyone could hear. Her next words would change everything. He's theirs. Confusion spread through the crowd. Theirs, what did that mean? Arya continued, her voice carrying across the arena. He's not a civilian. He's a soldier. A human soldier. She turned to face the military officers. Isn't that right, Commander Thex? Isn't that what you've been hiding? Thex's face went pale. Around the arena, the truth began to dawn on those who understood the implications. Arya looked back at Deho. What unit? Deho stood straighter. After months of pretending, of hiding, he finally spoke the truth out loud. Special Operations Command. Earth Defense Force, serial number 2794461. The arena exploded in pandemonium. Warriors shouted in denial. Nobles demanded explanations. Slaves looked at Deho with new eyes, not as one of them, but as something else entirely. And in the chaos, Princess Arya made another decision. Guards, this human is now under Imperial protection. Anyone who touches him answers to me personally. She leaned closer to Daiho and whispered, "We need to talk. Right now. Before the military decides dead men tell no tales." Princess Arya's personal guards formed a protective circle around Daiho as they escorted him from the arena. Commander Thex tried to block their path, his hand on his weapon, but Arya's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Stand down, Commander, or are you planning to assault a member of the royal family?" Thex's jaw worked silently. Around him, other military officers were having urgent, whispered conversations. They'd spent 20 years building a lie, and now it was crumbling in front of thousands of witnesses. Finally, Thex stepped aside, but his eyes promised violence later. They took Daiho to Arya's private transport. Once inside the secure vehicle, the princess activated a privacy field that would block any listening devices. She sat across from him, studying his face carefully. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 3 months. Standard Valorian time. And in those 3 months, you've been gathering intelligence. On our slave networks, our military installations, our security protocols? It wasn't a question. Daiho nodded. That was the mission. Your capture wasn't an accident. No, Your Highness. It was very deliberate. Arya leaned back in her seat, her mind racing. You volunteered to be captured. To be enslaved. Also, you could infiltrate our systems and find where the missing humans were being taken. Earth doesn't abandon its people, Daiho said simply. We'd been tracking the disappearances for 5 years. Civilian transports vanishing, small colonies going silent. We needed to know where they were going and why. And now you know. Now I know. He met her eyes directly. Tens of thousands of humans scattered across your empire. Sold as slaves, forced into labor, treated as animals. All while your government tells the galaxy that humans are weak and primitive. The transport lifted off, heading toward the Imperial Palace. Arya watched the barracks complex shrink below them. My father doesn't know. The Emperor doesn't know about the scale of the slavery operation. The military has been conducting unauthorized raids for 20 years. With respect, Your Highness, that seems unlikely. This operation is too large to hide from. My father knows about the slavery, Arya interrupted. He knows we have human slaves. What he doesn't know is the truth about Earth, about what happened 20 years ago. She pulled out her datapad and entered a security code so complex it took nearly 30 seconds to input. Classified files appeared on the screen, marked with the highest level of military secrecy. She turned the datapad so Daiho could see. 20 years ago, the Valorian Empire encountered Earth for the first time. Our scouts reported a primitive world, barely capable of spaceflight with weak inhabitants who had no natural weapons or defenses. The military council voted to invade and claim Earth as a resource colony. She scrolled through the files showing deployment records. They sent a full invasion fleet. 60 warships, 50,000 ground troops. It should have been an easy conquest. Daiho's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He knew this story. He'd lived with its consequences his entire life. Arya continued, her voice quiet. 37 ships returned. Fewer than 3,000 ground troops survived. The rest were destroyed or captured by Earth's military. Your people didn't just defend yourselves. You slaughtered us. The files showed after-action reports, medical records of survivors, psychological evaluations. The survivors told stories that sounded like nightmares. Human soldiers who fought with a ferocity that made Krogar berserkers seem tame. Tactics that turned every disadvantage into a deadly advantage. Booby traps, ambushes, psychological warfare. Humans who would pretend to surrender, then detonate explosives that killed themselves and their captors. Humans who fought to their last breath, never retreating, never showing fear. One of the survivors was Commander Thex, Arya said. He was a young officer then. His entire unit was wiped out in something you called urban warfare. He watched humans, civilians, not even soldiers, rig entire buildings to collapse on our troops. Daiho spoke quietly. Earth was invaded. We defended our home. And you did it so effectively that our military command made a decision. They classified everything. They lied to my father. Told him the invasion had been called off due to strategic concerns. They lied to the galaxy, maintained the fiction that humans were weak, and they changed tactics. Instead of invasion, they started the raids, Daiho finished. Take civilians, never military personnel. Small numbers spread across years. Nothing large enough to trigger a military response. Exactly. They've been testing. Probing. trying to understand human capabilities without directly confronting Earth's military again. Arya closed the files. But they captured you. A special operations soldier. Either they don't know what they caught, or someone knows and wants me disappeared before Earth notices, Deho said. The transport landed on a private platform of the Imperial Palace. More guards waited, these ones loyal to Arya personally rather than the military command. They escorted Deho to a secure apartment, comfortable but clearly still a prison. You'll stay here, Arya said, under my protection. I need to speak with my father before the military makes any moves. Your Highness, Deho said before she could leave. You should know that I've been transmitting regular status updates to Earth. Arya froze. What? Biological implant. Undetectable by your scanners. It sends a pulse transmission every 72 hours. If it stops transmitting, Earth will assume I'm dead or compromised. When was your last transmission? Deho checked his internal clock. 41 hours ago. So in 31 hours, if you don't transmit again, Earth will know something's wrong. They already know I'm compromised, Your Highness. I sent a burst transmission during the fight once I revealed myself. Earth knows everything now. Location of your slave markets. Transport routes. Security protocols. All of it. Arya felt the ground shifting under her feet. You're telling me Earth's military could already be mobilizing? Could be. Deho smiled slightly. Your Highness, Earth has had ships in position at the edge of your territory for 6 months. They were just waiting for my signal. By now, I'd estimate they're less than 48 hours from your capital world. The color drained from Arya's face. How many ships? I don't know the exact number. But Earth doesn't do anything halfway. When we come for our people, we come prepared. Arya left him under guard and ran to her father's throne room. She burst in without announcement, ignoring the protests of the court officials. Emperor Te Yang sat on his crystalline throne, discussing trade agreements with ambassadors. He looked up in surprise at his daughter's dramatic entrance. Father, we need to speak now. Privately. It's urgent. Something in her tone made him dismiss everyone immediately. When the room was empty except for his personal guards, Arya told him everything. The classified files, the invasion 20 years ago, the slavery operations, the human soldier in their arena, Earth's incoming fleet. Te Yang listened in growing horror. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice dangerous. Summon the military council. All of them. Right now. Within an hour, the council chamber was full. Supreme Commander Vorn stood at the head of the military officers, his face carefully neutral. Te Yang didn't waste time with pleasantries. 20 years ago, you told me the Earth invasion was called off due to strategic concerns. That was a lie. Vorn opened his mouth to speak, but Te Yang held up a hand. Don't insult me by denying it. My daughter has shown me the classified files. I know what really happened. You lost that war. Then you spent 20 years pretending it didn't happen while conducting unauthorized raids on human territory. Your Majesty, Vorn said carefully, we were protecting the Empire's interests. Admitting defeat to a primitive species would have shown weakness to our enemies. Protecting the Empire? You've potentially started a war that could destroy us. Te Yang stood, his voice rising. And now you've captured one of their soldiers, an intelligence operative who's been transmitting everything back to Earth. Their fleet is probably already on its way. Then we strike first, Vorn said coldly. Kill the human. Destroy the evidence. Prepare our defenses. We have the advantage of position. Did you have the advantage 20 years ago? Arya interjected. You outnumbered them and had better technology. You still lost 37 ships and 47,000 troops. We were unprepared then. We underestimated them. It won't happen again. You're still underestimating them. Deho's voice came from the doorway. He stood there with Bora beside him, having somehow slipped away from his guards. You think this is about military might. It's not. It's about what you've done to our civilians. You've enslaved our people, hurt them, sold them like animals. He walked forward, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. Earth doesn't forgive that. Earth doesn't forget that, and Earth is coming. Vorn pulled his blade. Then you die here, human, and we'll kill every slave to destroy the evidence. Do that, Deho said quietly. And Earth won't just defeat you. They'll erase you from existence. Every world you control, every station you've built, all of it gone. Because you'll have proven you're not an empire. You're just slavers and murderers who deserve no mercy. The room fell silent. Taeyang looked at his daughter, then at Daeho, then at his military council. He made a decision that would define his legacy. "Stand down, Supreme Commander. Put away your weapon." When Vorn hesitated, Taeyang's voice became the next 48 hours moved like lightning. Emperor Taeyang issued emergency orders across the entire empire. Every human slave was to be located, documented, and prepared for transport. Any resistance would be met with the full weight of imperial law. It was the largest mobilization of resources in Valorian history for a peacetime operation. Princess Arya took personal command of the logistics. She worked from a command center in the palace, coordinating with governors across dozens of worlds. Daeho stood beside her, providing information about the slave routes he'd discovered and identifying key locations. "There's a processing center on the fourth moon of Corvin," he said, pointing to a star chart. "At least 2,000 humans there, maybe more. They sort captured civilians before sending them to auction houses. Arya sent orders immediately. A royal cruiser would go to Corvin with authority to shut down the facility and secure every human found there. Similar orders went to mining colonies, agricultural worlds, even military installations where humans had been forced into labor. But not everyone in the empire was cooperating. Reports came in of slave traders destroying records before inspectors arrived. Some facilities claimed their human slaves had died in accidents just before the royal ships reached them. And in the military, Supreme Commander Vorn's loyalists were quietly resisting every order that came from the Emperor. "They're going to make a move," Daeho warned Arya during a brief rest period. Vorn and his commanders. "They can't let this stand. Everything they've built depends on keeping Earth weak and distant. My father has stripped Vorn of field command. He can't mobilize forces without—" An explosion rocked the palace. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Arya's personal guards rushed in, weapons ready. "Your Highness, we're under attack! Military forces have breached the outer defenses." It was happening. The military coup they'd all feared. Bora, who'd been helping coordinate with other freed slaves, grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard. "How many?" "At least 2 battalions, the guard captain reported. They're trying to reach the human holding areas. Orders are to eliminate all evidence." Daeho's expression went cold. "They're going to kill the slaves. All of them." Arya made a decision. "Get word to my father. Tell him Vorn has committed treason. Then evacuate the humans, all of them, to the diplomatic ships in orbit." "Your Highness, the diplomatic ships aren't designed for—" "I don't care what they're designed for. Move our people now." She turned to Daeho.
"Can you fight?"
"Can I breathe?" He picked up a Valorian blade from the fallen guard. It was heavy and unbalanced for his frame, but it would do. They moved through the palace corridors, Arya's loyal guards forming a protective formation around them. Behind them, hundreds of human slaves who'd been brought to the palace for processing followed in a desperate column. They could hear weapons fire echoing through the building. Vorn's troops were cutting their way toward them. "The royal hangar is 2 levels down," Arya said. "If we can reach it, we can use the emergency transports." They reached a grand staircase and started descending. Then Vorn himself appeared at the bottom with 50 heavily armed soldiers. His face was twisted with rage and something else, desperation. His entire career, his entire legacy was crumbling. "It ends here, Princess," Vorn called up to them. "Step aside. This isn't your concern. I'm the Emperor's daughter. Everything in this empire is my concern. Then you'll die with them. All of you." Vorn raised his weapon. "Fire!" What happened next would be discussed in military academies for generations. Daeho moved before the first shot was fired. He didn't run toward Vorn. That would have been suicide. Instead, he grabbed a decorative shield from the wall and threw it spinning into the stairway's lighting array. The heavy shield shattered the lights, plunging the stairway into darkness. In the confusion, Daeho dropped low and rolled down the stairs. Vorn's troops fired blindly, their shots hitting walls and ceiling. In the darkness, Daeho was a ghost. He moved through their formation like wind through grass, his blade finding vulnerable points between armor plates, knee joints, elbows, throats. By the time emergency lighting kicked in 15 seconds later, 6 of Vorn's soldiers were down. Daeho stood in the middle of their formation, his blade dripping. He wasn't even breathing hard. The rest of Vorn's troops hesitated. They'd just watched a weak human drop 6 of their comrades in the dark. Their training told them to attack, but their instincts screamed warning. Arya's guards used the hesitation to advance down the stairs, weapons raised. "Supreme Commander Vorn, you are under arrest for treason against the Emperor." Vorn snarled and pulled Arya's guard captain forward as a shield. "Come any closer and I'll—" He never finished the sentence. Deho threw his blade in a precise spin. It passed within inches of the guard captain's head and buried itself in Vorn's shoulder. The Supreme Commander screamed and dropped his weapon. The guard captain broke free and restrained him. The other troops, seeing their commander down, surrendered. The coup had failed, but there was no time to celebrate. Reports came in from across the city. Other military units loyal to Vorn had attacked the human processing centers. Hundreds of slaves were trapped, and Vorn's soldiers were moving to eliminate them before they could be evacuated. "We need to move faster," Deho said urgently. "Every minute we waste, more humans die." They reached the royal hangar where Arya's diplomatic fleet waited. The ships were elegant vessels designed for comfort, not cargo, but they'd have to work. Arya ordered them loaded beyond safe capacity, cramming humans into every available space. Outside the hangar, they could hear the sounds of battle. Emperor Taiyang's loyal forces were fighting Vorn's troops throughout the city. The Empire was tearing itself apart. As the last humans were loaded onto the ships, Deho received an alert from his biological implant. He touched his chest and closed his eyes for a moment, receiving data. When he opened them, his expression had changed. "They're here," he said quietly. "Who's here?" Arya asked. "Earth." In orbit above the Valorian capital world, space rippled. Jump signatures appeared in dozens of locations simultaneously, a coordinated emergence that spoke of precise planning and perfect timing. From the void came ships bearing Earth's emblem, not just military vessels but a full expeditionary fleet. At their head was the EDS Indomitable, Admiral Jiwoo's flagship. She was a veteran of 20 years of silent preparation, training for a war she hoped would never come but knew was inevitable. When the signal came from Deho, she'd mobilized instantly. Now she looked at the Valorian capital world on her view screen, at the orbital defense stations and the fleet of warships moving to intercept her forces. The Valorians outnumbered her 20-1. 20 years ago, that advantage hadn't saved them. It wouldn't save them now. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." Her communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Jiwoo's voice went out across the void, heard by every ship, every station, every communication device in the system. "This is Admiral Jiwoo of the Earth Defense Force. We are here to retrieve our citizens who have been illegally enslaved by the Valorian Empire. We do not seek war. We do not seek conquest. We want our people. Nothing more. Nothing less." She paused, letting that sink in. Then her voice became harder. "But make no mistake. If you resist, if you harm even one more human under your control, we will turn this entire system into a graveyard. Your technology is more advanced than ours. Your ships are faster, your weapons more powerful. But we've had 20 years to study how you fight. 20 years to prepare, and we remember what you did to our civilians." In the palace hangar, Arya listened to the transmission with growing dread. This was it, the moment of truth. Would her father choose peace, or would pride demand that the Empire fight? Emperor Taiyang's voice came over the system-wide channel, shaking but determined. "Admiral Jiwoo, this is Emperor Taiyang of the Valorian Empire. I acknowledge the crimes committed against your people. I acknowledge that elements of my military conducted unauthorized operations that violated every principle of civilized conduct, and I accept full responsibility." The Valorian fleet commanders were screaming protests over secure channels, but Taiyang ignored them. "I am ordering all Valorian forces to stand down. I am granting you access to every facility where humans are held. I am providing you with complete documentation of the slavery operations, and I am offering myself for judgment by Earth's authority for what has been done." Silence filled the void. Every eye in the system watched and waited. Admiral Jiwoo's response was careful. "Your Majesty, your offer is noted. But words are easy. Actions matter. We will begin retrieval operations immediately. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Any attempt to harm our people will result in consequences your empire cannot afford. Do you understand?" "I understand, Admiral. You will have full cooperation." "We'll see." The Earth fleet began moving into position, establishing a perimeter around the planet. Valorian ships backed away, clearing corridors for the human vessels. It was a humiliation for the Empire's military, but it was survival. In the palace hangar, Arya's ships began launching, heading for orbit with their cargo of rescued humans. Deho watched them go, then looked. The retrieval operations took 6 days. 6 days of Earth ships moving through Valorian space, collecting humans from dozens of worlds. 6 days of reuniting families torn apart by the slave raids. 6 days of tears, joy, anger, and relief. Deho worked alongside Earth's special operations teams, guiding them to locations he'd identified during his months undercover. Some rescues were simple, walking into processing centers and loading people onto transports. Others were complicated by governors who'd tried to hide their human slaves or by facilities where the slaves had been worked nearly to death. On the 4th day, they found the mining colony on Corvin's moon. 2,300 humans were there, most of them in terrible condition. When the Earth ships landed, the miners stood in the underground tunnels, blinking in disbelief. Many of them had been captive for years. They'd stopped believing Earth would come. Deho was part of the rescue team that went in. He found families huddled together in the dark, children who'd been born in captivity and had never seen their home world. An older man, his hair gone white from years of hard labor, grabbed Deho's arm with trembling hands. "Is it real?" the man whispered. "Or am I dreaming again?" "It's real," Deho assured him. "We're taking you home. All of you," the man broke down crying. Around him, others did the same. Years of pain, fear, and despair came pouring out. But beneath the tears was something else, hope. For the first time in years, they had hope. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, Princess Arya worked with Earth's diplomatic corps to document everything. Every slave trader was named. Every facility was listed. Every crime was recorded. The documentation filled hundreds of data files, a complete record of 20 years of systematic slavery. Emperor Tai Yang appeared before Earth's officials, his pride stripped away, his face haggard. "I cannot undo what has been done. I cannot return the years stolen from your people. All I can offer is truth, accountability, and a commitment that this will never happen again." Admiral Jiwoo listened to his statement without expression. She'd spent 6 days watching human slaves come aboard her ships, seeing the scars on their bodies and the trauma in their eyes. Every face made her anger grow, but she was also a professional, and professionals understood that revenge and justice were different things. "Your Majesty," she said finally, "Earth will require more than words. Name your terms." Over the next 2 days, the terms were negotiated. They were harsh but fair. The Valorian Empire would pay reparations to every human slave and their families. Every official involved in the slavery operations would face trial, either by Earth's authority or by the Empire's own courts under Earth's observation. The Empire would establish a permanent monitoring station to ensure compliance. And most significantly, the truth about Earth's military capabilities would be made public across the galaxy. That last term hurt the Empire more than the others. For 20 years, they'd maintained the fiction that humans were weak. The revelation that Earth had defeated a Valorian invasion fleet would shatter their military prestige. Other species would see them as vulnerable. Enemies would circle like predators sensing weakness. But Taeyang agreed to all of it. He had no choice. Supreme Commander Vorn and 37 other high-ranking officers were handed over to Earth's custody. They would face trial for crimes against humanity. Vorn went in chains, still defiant, still convinced he'd done the right thing. He would spend the rest of his life in an Earth prison, and history would remember him as a war criminal. On the 7th day, the last humans were loaded onto Earth's ships. 15,233 civilians rescued from across the Valorian Empire. Some had been captive for months, others for years. All of them were going home. Deho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the fleet prepared to jump back to Earth space. Admiral Jiwoo approached him, her expression softer than it had been during the negotiations. "Good work, Lieutenant," she said quietly. 3 months undercover. Most operatives couldn't have lasted 3 weeks without breaking. "I had motivation," Deho replied. "Every human I saw in chains reminded me why I was there. Still, you did well." She glanced at the view screen where the Valorian capital world was slowly shrinking. "Think they'll keep their word?" "I think Emperor Taeyang will. He's old-fashioned, believes in honor. His daughter will make sure he follows through. Speaking of his daughter, she's asked permission to come aboard. Wants to speak with you before we leave." Deho raised an eyebrow. "Permission granted?" "It's your call." You're the one who dealt with her most directly. Let her come." 20 minutes later, Princess Arya was escorted onto the Indomitable's bridge. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of everything that had happened. But her eyes were still sharp, still intelligent. She approached Deho and stopped a respectful distance away. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for not killing Vexer that day in the arena. You could have. It would have been justified. But you showed mercy." "Mercy wasn't the goal," Deho replied. "I needed to prove a point without causing unnecessary death. Killing Vexer would have made him a martyr. Defeating him made him an example. It worked. That fight changed everything. Once people saw what you were capable of, they couldn't maintain the lie anymore." She paused, then continued. "I also wanted to ask, will Earth forgive us ever?" Deho considered the question carefully. "Earth doesn't forgive easily. What happened to our people, what was done to them? That's not something you apologize for and move on, but Earth understands the difference between an empire and its people. Your father and the military command made these choices. Not every Valorian. Not you. I didn't stop it. I should have known, should have questioned. You were kept in the dark deliberately. And when you learned the truth, you acted immediately. That counts for something." He met her eyes. "You asked if Earth will forgive. I can't answer that. But I can say this. Earth respects courage and honor. Your father showed both when he admitted the truth and accepted accountability. You showed both when you protected me and helped rescue our people. That's a foundation to build on." Arya nodded slowly. "My father is stepping down. The Empire needs new leadership, someone who can guide us into a different future. The Council has asked me to take the throne. Will you? If I do, I want to establish real diplomatic relations with Earth. Not as enemies or even as cautious neighbors, but as partners. The galaxy is a dangerous place. If we're going to survive, we need to be able to work together." Admiral Jiwoo, who'd been listening, spoke up. "That's above my authority, Your Highness. But I'll relay the message to Earth's government. They'll make that decision. Thank you, Admiral." Arya turned back to Deho and offered her hand in the human custom. "Whatever happens, I hope we meet again under better circumstances." Deho shook her hand. "So do I." She left, escorted back to her shuttle by Earth Marines who treated her with respect but kept their weapons ready. Old hatreds didn't die quickly. The Earth fleet jumped to hyperspace an hour later. The trip home took 3 weeks, but it felt like 3 days to the rescued humans. They spent the time reconnecting with families, receiving medical treatment, and slowly processing their freedom. Counselors worked around the clock, helping people deal with trauma. It would take years for some of them to fully recover. Bora traveled with the Earth fleet. She'd chosen to leave the Valorian Empire knowing she'd be seen as a traitor there. Earth offered her and others like her asylum, a chance to start over somewhere new. She stood on an observation deck watching the stars stream past when Deho found her. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "I don't know your world. I don't know your customs. What if I don't fit?" "Then you'll be like most humans," Deho said with a slight smile. "Nobody fits perfectly anywhere. You find your place. Make it work. Earth's got billions of people from thousands of cultures. You'll find somewhere you belong." When the fleet finally emerged from hyperspace near Earth, the sight took everyone's breath away. The blue-green planet hung in space like a jewel, beautiful and welcoming. Defense stations and orbital facilities surrounded it, a ring of protection around humanity's cradle world. But beneath the military presence was something else: home. The rescued humans pressed against viewports, many of them crying. Children who'd been born in captivity saw their species' homeworld for the first time. Adults who thought they'd never see it again felt something break open inside them. Earth's orbital facilities coordinated the landing of thousands of people. Families were reunited with relatives who'd spent years not knowing if their loved ones were alive. News services covered every moment, and the stories of survival and rescue spread across the planet. In the following weeks, Earth's government made its decision about the Valorian Empire. They would accept the terms negotiated by Admiral Jiwoo. They would establish diplomatic relations but with permanent monitoring. And they would make sure every species in the galaxy knew the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans did not forgive slavery. And humans never abandoned their own. The revelation changed the political landscape across dozens of systems. Species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant suddenly reassessed their positions. The Valorian Empire's neighbors, who'd feared Valorian military might,